Welcome one more day to Ena Harmony, a space to reconnect with the true divine I amness, which, as we saw in the previous video, is not simply an abstract intelligence, but the manifestation of a true divine personality, divine soul. And this is precisely why we call it soul making. And as we've been seeing, the main four qualities of the divine soul are the unconditional love coming from the true original source, the so-called Father of Lights, that manifests in the universe as the expansive conscience that recognizes itself as the Son originated from that original source, expressing also the mother life, the spontaneous vitality that has no modification, no alterations of any kind, generating an infinite serenity full of resting life known as daughter. There we have qualities symbolized by the four members of the divine family: Father, Son, Mother, Daughter. And these qualities must first unite within us so they can be expressed and seen outside. This is why today I'm going to speak about the reunion of the divine masculine and feminine inside, and also the recognition of these qualities outside as the divine brotherhood and sisterhood of the soul, and also the so-called twin soul phenomenon, which is usually mistaken for other manifestations such as the relation of polar psyches. I'll explain the difference later. But before going to these subjects, we must understand that the world we see around, full of genders, masculine, feminine, men, women, is only a shadow of the true divine kingdom of the Holy One, which is often translated as kingdom of God, but remember that the concept of God is very vague. It's also applied to the adversary, and it does not express the teachings of light brought by Yeshua and true manifestations of the divine. The kingdom of the Holy One is that absolute realm in which nothing is lacking, all opposites are integrated, there is unicity, and therefore beings do not seek for completion with external relations. They are complete inside, and they have all life. They do not die and are not in need of marriages and other relations. This is why Yeshua said that in the return to the original state, which was translated as resurrection, even when the Greek text in the Gospel says anastasis, upward state, so we should rather translate in the return or ascension to the original state. Nobody marries nor gives himself or herself into marriage, because obviously everyone is complete. Even though the divine soul might manifest its feminine and masculine qualities in the form of female or male figures in other dimensions, but that's another question. Yeshua was basically answering the question of the Pharisees. They asked him which one of the 7 husbands of the widow wife would resurrect in the last days. And Yeshua was explaining that that kind of carnal resurrection does not apply to divine mentality. And he also said that the kingdom of the Holy One does not come by observation. We cannot say there it is or here it is, because it's rather state of conscience that begins to be experienced inwards. We perceive the divine values or divine qualities with the eye of conscience. And we can even perceive those qualities in this fallen world. And thus we transform the world, bringing back the divided opposites into the original state. First within us, and then expressing that outwards. This is why there is another expression, which is the so-called kingdom of heaven, which as we saw is not really heaven or sky, but rather divine soul, because the word translated as heaven and even heavens in Hebrew is Shemaim, which is the union of fire, the fire of consciousness and conscience, and the waters of existence. So there is a purification of spirit when the fire of consciousness acts upon the emotional waters of the world, bringing back the opposites to the integrated state. And this is really integrating elements from the tree of knowledge of good and bad into the tree of lives, which is not modified. Remember that the tree of knowledge of good and bad is the result of genetic modifications that the fallen architects introduced into the universe because they were immature and selfish. This is why we live in a world full of division, gender issues, pain, suffering, something which does not exist in the Tree of Lives, the original universe. Therefore, we must take into account this process of purification, which is the kingdom of the divine soul. This is why Yeshua said the kingdom of the heavens, or the kingdom of the divine soul, has approached, because now we can work consciously in order to bring back everything to its original state. And obviously this begins by uniting the divine masculine and feminine inside us. The divine masculine is expressed through qualities such as clear attention, discipline, capacity to protect that which is pure in our heart, mind, and also physically. Honesty to express our true divine soul. And the divine feminine qualities are receptivity, patience, sensitivity, intuition, sense of beauty, sense of harmonia, also capacity to endure pain and suffering with patience. And we must understand that both feminine and masculine qualities must grow either in male or female persons. However, these qualities find harmonia in a different way. In the case of males, they must manifest the divine masculine first. They have to be attentive and have a clear focus of the mind, so the divine feminine can grow in themselves as well, making them more receptive and intuitive. And the same goes for females. They have to express their feminine qualities so they can develop their masculine qualities, being more attentive and focused, able to protect their purity. On the contrary, when a male loses his divine masculinity, then he becomes controlled by the emotions, his negative feminine side, and they also trigger the negative masculine side. So emotions such as rage, anger, anxiety, jealousy lead to negative masculine qualities such as the wish to control others, to exert dominion, even by means of violence. He also becomes dispersed, unattentive, lacking true consciousness. And when a woman loses her natural receptivity and compassion and sensitivity, then she also becomes dominated by the masculine negative side. She wants to control the partner, friends, husband. She becomes opinionated, lacking attention, clarity. And this lack of harmonia is actually what has led to a society full of conflicts on the family domain, but also in relations with friends and with most people. But also in the so-called gender issues, there are many people who no longer know if they are male or female. And in many cases, this is due to child abuse or a lack of harmonious education, a lack of a loving father or a loving mother, and also genetic alterations, because generation after generation the alteration in the psyche has generated modifications on the genome, and this comes from ancient civilizations. We learn from ancient accounts that several civilizations came to be destroyed when they became dissolute, when the opposites began to mix in a confusing way, as it happens with the apparition of the so-called third gender, the third sex, which takes place always in epochs of great upheavals and often leads to the dissolution of civilizations such as the civilization of Atlantis. The Greek sage Plato talked about how the incarnation of unrectified souls led to the destruction of that civilization. This happens because in those periods of dissolution, unrectified psyches incarnate, and they do not have any process of inner work. They lack harmonia and express animal tendencies that come from ancestral modifications. So they are not natural. They were the result of experiments made by the fallen engineers, the famous Enki, the serpent, and even the previous architects, Enlil. This is why it's so important to bring back the integration of the divine qualities, the expression of the divine family, because there is no other way the opposites can be reintegrated into the source beyond the state of confusion and suffering that the earth is experiencing. And this is why it's so important to recognize the members of the divine family outside, and specifically the members of our particular subfamily, because when we are incarnated into the world we come with groups of divine members that express specific characteristics of the divine family. Some groups of soul may be more artistic, others might be more focused on social work of different kinds, and obviously when they come together or recognize each other, they can find more inspiration and they can complete their life mission easier. Otherwise it's almost impossible. And notice that the biological family is very often different from the spiritual divine family. Actually, when we are born in biological families, we not always find members of our divine family within our earthly family. This is why many times there are conflicts or a lack of syntony, a lack of relation with family members. We can love each other but have no themes in common to work on, and this is a source of conflict. Very often divine family members are seen as the black sheep, and sometimes they are even forced to move out because they cannot stand so much light within the family. This is why Yeshua said 5 will be in a house, the father against the son against the father, and so on. But obviously that's part of the process of transformation. Sometimes the divine family has to remove certain elements, and this causes friction. Now, the divine brotherhood is the general view. We might recognize members of our divine family, but sometimes there is another phenomenon which is very enigmatic and often confusing, which is the so-called phenomenon of the twin souls. Not everyone experiences this phenomenon because not everyone has a divine soul in the process of formation, and very often it's mistaken for the process of polar psyches. We might say twin psyches, which are human psyches that are complementary on the biological level, emotional level, and mental level, but not necessarily on the spiritual level. Someone must have a divine soul personality formed and being manifested already, so the true phenomenon of the twin soul can take place. But what is a twin soul? A twin soul is when one single divine personality, oneself, manifests through at least 2 human psyches that are complementary on most levels, biologically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So it's one expressed in 2, and this process is analogous to the phenomenon of the physical twins. We are told by biologists that the physical twins are developed within the same zygote, which is the cell resulting from uniting the sperm and the female ovum. Then the 2 embryos grow within the zygote, developing as fetuses, growing until they are born as babies. And the same goes for divine souls in general, especially when they are twin souls. A single divine soul can also be developed as a seed of conscience that expands, becomes more aware of itself and the source of true life, becoming an embryo soul, a baby soul, and being finally born, gradually experiencing the process of birth pangs and the baptism of fire, the fire of consciousness. And when this process takes place in 2 psyches at the same time, is a very specific spiritual path. Very few people come to experience this because it's not easy, even when 2 people are somehow destined to move along that path of transformation. First of all, these cases are souls that have a divine mission of transformation by means of love in a more intense way. The level of unconditional love is expanded in the twin soul path, and very often this is not easy because the world personality of the people is not in tune with the divine essence. So even though they might meet with their twin soul on the physical realm, they might not be able to recognize that singleness, that union at once. It depends on their development, and this can take many years of transformation. This is not a theory. Some of us have experienced this, and it's not easy. It's very difficult because there are many dimensions involved. The union of twin soul is not simply physical. It has nothing to do with human relationships as they are often understood. Actually, most people mistake a twin soul relation with a conventional romantic relationship, and that's not the case. Actually, this spiritual path breaks all human conceptions because the union, as I said, is on deeper levels. First of all, they are one soul and they can inspire each other mentally and emotionally. Even if they do not meet physically, they can see each other by means of visions, dreams, or other relation at distance, telepathically. But obviously, the more in harmony they are within, the more chance they have to meet in the physical world. And obviously, when they meet or see each other, they definitely are going to fall in love in a way which is deeper, much deeper than the usual falling in love in the human domain. This is something that goes beyond the carnal manifestations, because this is really falling in love with one's own divinity, is seeing the divine mirrored on another individual, experiencing a more multidimensional and expanded sense of oneself. Twin soulship is the expansion of conscience on a very deep level. And as I said, it's a spiritual path that not everyone experiences. It's not for every person. And there is another term for the so-called twin souls, which is twin flames. And I'd say it's a good term because, as I've said in other occasions, the inner connection can be described as the spark of two flames. The divine feminine and divine masculine can be expressed as two flames, and this is actually symbolized by the double flame on the head of the apostles in the episode of Pentecost. So there is an activation of the divine soul that indicates the union of the opposites inside. I'll expand this theme of the twin souls, twin flames, in later videos if there is an interest, but realize it's a very complex issue that has to be experienced. It's not a theory. And regardless of whether you are experiencing this path or not, simply realize that the most important is to unite the opposites within first, the divine feminine and divine masculine qualities. And this integration of opposites inside is really the union of divine essence and personality. Otherwise, it's the personality of the world full of lies. When our personality expresses the divine essence, then it's the true, authentic, divine personality. And this is actually what leads to more harmonious relationships with everyone, not only divine family members. This also opens the possibility of finding complementary types with which there can be a non-destructive relation, whether it is friendship or romantic. The key is always inner transformation. And this cannot take place if we are not authentic. So first of all, we have to be honest with ourselves, recognize what we are and express it without fear. Then the others should be able to recognize that authenticity, and if they are in tune with the truth, they will respond with harmonia. If they are not in tune, they'll probably attack us, but that's their problem, not ours. And now, having received these teachings as a blessing, I simply encourage you to express your divine soul with authenticity. And until the next time, thanks for listening and blessings.